Welcome to Zombie City Tours. Advanced civilizations used to live where you live. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight. Our ancestors were pyramid builders, experts at transporting and building with heavy stone, aka masonry. Their faces and their logos are engraved in stone all over our cities, and their pyramids still surround us. Now here's some more ridiculous claims. There's a single God that created you, me, the world, and all things in it, and he created a specific location of land that he deems better than all other locations of land. And he promised this land to a man named Abraham and all his children for forever. This is why we've all heard the phrase, the promised land. And the land we currently call USA is the land God promised to Abraham, and our cities and our mountains are actually the proof of it. And God promises that it will remain the most blessed land on earth as long as its inhabitants follow Jesus Christ. And if they don't, it gets cursed, destroyed, and given away to somebody else. So let's look at the fruits. Is the most choice land prospering, or is it being deteriorated and given away? If you're curious, enjoy the vids. If you're not, I'm sure I'll hear from you in the comments telling me how dumb I am. Either way, dig deeper, explore your city, and most importantly, explore your God. Ask him questions and study his word. This building's gotta be at least 1,000 years old. Welcome zombies, we're in Providence, Rhode Island. Welcome zombies. In this video we're looking at Providence, Rhode Island. One of the main things we're going to look at in this video is this guy up here and why he's wearing a skirt around his waist type of thing. We'll talk about it. This is where Rhode Island's located. It's the far east of the United States of America. This little tiny state right over here. And God in ancient times made a covenant with a man named Abraham, and that covenant was passed to Jacob and then Joseph of Egypt. And part of that covenant was a specific location on earth. And that location, that land that they were promised, is actually the land that is now called the United States of America. I know a lot of people think it's over in the Middle East. That's not true. And I break this down entirely in this Zombie Rod of Iron channel. There's 12 videos right here. I call it the Stone Woman presentation. There's a playlist on that channel called the Stone Woman. 12 videos, and I walk you through the Old Testament and show you a bunch of stuff about the land that's now called the United States of America, and how it is truly the actual promised location that was promised anciently to first to Adam, and then to Noah, and then Abraham, and then Jacob, whose name got changed to Israel, then Joseph of Egypt, and then actually a man named Lehi, and then after that Joseph Smith Jr. And I show you this in the Old Testament, but if you pay attention, you read it slowly, and you actually take the text for what it says versus what all these other people and churches and organizations say the text says. That's a huge mistake people are making nowadays, is not reading the verses themselves and not understanding it themselves, because there's a bunch of people yapping a bunch of words about what it says, and they're lying and they're deceiving and they're not saying what the text actually says. So I break that down in the Stone Woman presentation. I pull up a bunch of scriptures on the screen and we read it all, and I go through it all together. So the ancient covenant, and part of that is that they were stonemasons. They were moving around extremely heavy stone, and they were advanced, prosperous civilizations. This is what I'm saying, like all the pictures and images and stuff that were shown nowadays about the Bible stories and all that is poor dirt rag people. If you read what the verses actually say, it does not say that. It says these were advanced people who were moving around super heavy stone, building amazing architecture, and it was gold, silver, copper, brass, iron, bunch of precious stones, onyx stones, shining stones, stones of a bunch of different colors. If you read the text, it says they were advanced, prosperous masons. And I believe we have a lot of their architecture still left in the promised land today, in the land we call the United States of America. Some of it's in ruin, some of it's in really nice condition, and a lot of it has very interesting symbols on it. And so we're going to be looking at some of the symbols on these buildings today and what they mean, and how they actually come from the Old Testament and what they actually mean. And then also there's this, that's the ancient covenant that God made, promised a specific location of land to Abraham and all of his seed. But then there's the ancient conspiracy, which started back really in the garden, but with man, it really started with Cain slaying Abel. That's really where the ancient conspiracy against mankind started. And what they do with this architecture that's connected to the ancient covenant is they pillage it, because there's a lot of nice stuff that they want, and they demolish it, and then they also lie about it. They make up new stories about where it came from, who built it, what time period it was built in, and they also lie about demolishing it and pillaging it. Oftentimes they'll say they're renewing stuff, they're conserving, they're doing preservation projects and all that stuff, when they're actually going in and pillaging and stripping and destroying. So for a very in-depth breakdown of that, there's a playlist called The Stone Woman. She's one of the main symbols on all these buildings. That's why I call it the Stone Woman. Stone Woman playlist on the We Zombie Rod of Iron channel for a very in-depth breakdown of that entire story. And the story goes that Providence was founded in 1636, although like I'm saying, there's architecture that was sitting here long before 1636, including the Capitol building, which we're going to look at. And the area was named in honor of God's merciful providence. And providence, the definition of that is God or nature, God, providing protective or spiritual care. And if you come down to this education section right here, I'm going to show us a bunch of super heavy stone masonry architecture. And for the time periods on dirt roads and no tools, no technology, no good vehicles, it's impossible to move this much weight around and build these types of buildings. They're far superior to the type of stuff that we build nowadays. And nowadays we have all these tractors and cranes and paved roads and cars and trains. And even with all that, we're not building stuff nearly as nice as this stone architecture that we're seeing. As an example right here, this stone obelisk is in Bennington, Vermont. I made a video previously on Bennington. This stone obelisk right here weighs 19 million pounds. Each of the stones is like 10 to 30 or 40,000 pounds each. 19 million pounds just to build this right here. No tools, no technology, no paved roads to move the stone around on. And if you look at how much a modern house weighs, between 100,000 and 200,000 pounds. 19 million pounds versus 200,000 pounds. That is a crazy, crazy, crazy difference. And to build our homes, we need all our paved roads, all our tractors, all our machinery, all the much bigger machinery to pull stuff out of the ground, to cut trees down, all that sort of stuff. But somehow, when they were super, super poor and didn't have any of that stuff, they built random towers that weigh 19 million pounds. And so that's where I'm saying, take a look at the Old Testament, see what it actually says, see what the Bible actually says, and the Book of Mormon about what people built, what these civilizations actually built. They were super advanced stone masonry civilizations. All this ancient architecture is connected to the promise, the covenant that God made with Abraham and then Jacob, whose name got changed to Israel. And I want to show you just a little bit about Jacob right here. And so just real quickly, in Genesis 28:12, this is the very first book of the Bible, it talks about Jacob and that he went to a location and then he had a dream and he saw a ladder set up on earth reaching up to heaven. In the Stone Woman presentation, I break down that this whole outer space story above us is also a hoax. And Jacob sees a ladder, it reaches up to heaven, and angels are coming up and down on it. And he says, the Lord stood above it, the ladder, and he looks down at Jacob and he says, Jacob, I'm the Lord of Abraham, your father, and I'm giving you the same promise I gave to him. This land is yours, and it's yours, and all of your seeds, all of your posterity. This is your location. And then Jacob wakes up and he goes, oh wow, surely this is the place. I knew it not. I didn't know that this is the Lord's place. And then he expands on that and he says, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So he's marking, well, here, let me go to the next verse. And then it says that he set up a pillar to mark this location. And I break this down in my Stone Women presentation, that pillar still stands in the exact location and is a marker of where the promised land actually is, which is in the United States of America. Now, one of the lies that the ancient conspiracy tells about this architecture, because they can't tell the real story, or then it tells all about God and that whole story. So one of the main things they do is they say they change the time periods that these buildings were constructed in, and oftentimes one thing they do is they say they got built super fast, like ridiculously fast, impossible for right now. Even with all our tools, advanced stuff right now, we still can't build these buildings in the timelines that they say they were built. And those people back then had way less means to do so. And so the timelines are just impossible. Like this one right here, like what a cool building in Rhode Island right here. I'll just show you a few different pictures of it that they give. Here's a look at the inside of it, just gorgeous. It's the most masterful architecture that exists in the world. And they say that it was built in 1 year, erected in 1828. Now we have this one right here, which is a church. Here's a little look at the interior. Amazing interior, always super, super tall ceilings, tons of pillars and arches. And this one was built in 1 year, between 1774 and 1775. If the stories are true, these people back then were way better architects and builders than we are nowadays. This one right here, it's called the Market House. Says it was constructed between 1773 and 1775, so 2 years. And all this stone right here, extremely, extremely heavy. How'd they move all the weight around? And it just got built in 2 years. And then this one might be the craziest, the fastest, the most ridiculous story of them all. Actually, the Capitol building, which we'll talk about in just a second. But they said that, it doesn't say on the Wikipedia page, so I Googled it. And when I did that, I found 1925 to 1928 is when they say that this one got built. A skyscraper of pure stone. And if we look right here on the bottom of it, a little blurry, but ancient civilizations depicted in the stone, which is very common. All these, and we're going to talk about this in this video, but all the people depicted on these, not always, but almost always, all the people depicted in stone on these buildings are wearing robes. We'll talk about why robes, but to have this built in 3 years out of straight stone, extremely thick, heavy walls of stone, that's definitely not happening. And so here's some of these people engraved in stone right here, and you'll see that they are wearing robes. And yeah, there's some words right there, but those words are just scratched in. That's very easy to do, to walk up to a building and scratch letters into the building. What's 1,000 billion times more difficult than that is to build this whole building. And these people engraved in stone as part of the overall structure are sitting there looking like this, and they're wearing robes and also swords. Very, very common to see these people always holding swords and also always holding shields. And then also next to it, you'll see that there's the Fascis right here. Talked about this in a previous video, but the Fascis is the symbol of God bundling up the wicked, the tares, and casting them into the fire. It's the parable of the wheat and the tares in the Bible, where it says that the wicked will be bundled up, and the tares, who are the wicked, will be bundled up and bound tightly and cast in the fire. That's what the Fascis is. That's why it's all over these buildings everywhere, because these buildings are telling the story. They're telling the Jesus Christ story. They're telling the Bible stories. And right here, these doors, same thing. The eagle is a symbol from the Old Testament, and it's specifically a symbol of the Promised Land. And like I'm saying, the Promised Land is the land now called the United States of America, and that's the symbol of the United States of America because it's actually the Promised Land. And the symbol comes from when God escaped the Israelites out of Egypt and took them to the Promised Land. He said, "I did that on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself to the Promised Land." That's what the eagle's all about. Okay, now we'll talk about the state house. Some states have capitol buildings, and in some states their capitol buildings are called state houses. Rhode Island is called the state house. The East Coast seems to have more state houses than the middle of the country or the West Coast. I still haven't figured out why a state house versus capitol building, but that's what this one's called, and it's the 4th largest structural dome in the world. So this dome right here, we'll take a closer look at it and the man on top of it, but the 4th largest in the world. They say it was constructed from 1891 to 1901, so 10 years. Now that's definitely a longer timeline than 1 or 2 years, but when you look at this building and 4th largest dome in the world, it's so much heavy stone. There's evidence of it being buried, and the walls surrounding it, it's like, yeah, even 10 years seems a little far-fetched, especially because back then, how are they moving all that weight around? How are they moving stones that weigh 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 pounds, hundreds of feet up in the air? And like I said, they use words like renovate, renewal, preservation, all these words when they pillage and destroy things. And right here, you'll see the structure underwent a major renovation in the late 1990s. In 2020, a lot of these buildings, when they closed down, there was renovation projects that went on in a bunch of them. And it says the Rhode Island State House is constructed of 327,000 cubic feet of Georgia marble, 15 million bricks, and 1,309 short tons of iron floor beams. The dome is the 4th largest self-supported marble dome in the world. Marble, iron, these are extremely heavy materials. These are some of the nicest, most advanced materials, and just a huge structure built entirely out of marble, and 15 million bricks, which is oftentimes the case on these. Like the core of the buildings is a lot of bricks, and then it's clad with much bigger, heavier stones. Here's the construction photo that they give, which, look, part of like my work that I've done is Photoshop stuff, and this is very easy to create in Photoshop. Super easy, like really, really easy to create this in Photoshop, and they do it over and over again, where you just delete like half of the image, the top half or whatever, and then just add a bunch of scaffolding to it. Super easy to create fake images like this. So I would say this is definitely not a real construction photo. And then you have this guy right here on top of the building. He's got a spear in one hand, an anchor in the other hand. But what I'm really gonna focus on is, what is he wearing around his waist? Basically nothing, but there's something there, and that's something we're gonna talk about. The statue is cast in bronze and says was originally covered in gold leaf. It doesn't say how much it weighs right here, but surely extremely, extremely heavy on the top of this huge, heavy marble dome in a time period where that type of architecture would have been impossible. So this is why it's ancient architecture left over, and we're just lied to about where it actually comes from and who actually built it. So let's talk about what this guy has around his waist, and then we'll look at the dome and the interior. If you're in the building looking up at the dome, we'll look at some very interesting stuff looking up at the dome. So he's got this apron or girdle around his waist. So Isaiah, when we look in the Old Testament, Isaiah 11:5 says, righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. Girdle right here is a symbol of righteousness. Jeremiah 13:2, I got a girdle according to the word of the Lord and put it on my loins. Jeremiah 13:11, this one's very specific about what it is a symbol of. As the girdle cleaveth to the loins of a man, so have I caused to cleave unto me the whole house of Israel and the whole house of Judah, saith the Lord, that they might be unto me for a people. This is a covenant. This girdle is a symbol of the covenant that God made with his people, the tribes of Israel. And Israel is a man, and his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. So the Jacob's pillar that I just talked about, that's Israel. His name got changed to Israel. Israel is not a country in the Middle East. I break that down super thoroughly in the Stone Woman presentation, but right here it's a symbol of how the tribes of Israel, God's people, are supposed to cleave unto him like a girdle cleaves unto your loins. Mark 1:6, this is the New Testament talking about John the Baptist, the man that baptized Jesus Christ, says that John was clothed with a girdle of skin about his loins. So now when we look at this statue on top of this ancient stone structure, that's what we see is a man with a girdle on his loins. and it's a representation of righteousness cleaving unto God. Here's a look at the interior of the building. Just look at all like stone handrails, stone stairs, all just extremely beautiful stonework, pillars, insanity as far as architecture goes. And then here's a look at looking up at the dome right here. And you can see that, and I'm pretty sure always that with these domes, there's huge pillars that are also helping like support the dome. And then all of this is real gold and real brass, which is all the materials that are talked about in the Old Testament and the Book of Mormon about what these people built, which are not materials that we build with nowadays. We very, very, very rarely build with any type of stone or any type of gold or any type of brass. But then when you look at these buildings that are insanity as far as architecture goes, the same materials that are talked about over and over again in the scriptures, they're showing up all over these buildings. But specifically on this, I want to look at these symbols that are on here, or this lady that is depicted, which is the stone woman. And she's always robed, and she always is holding or showing other symbols with her. So in this one, she's got a rod with an eagle on top of it. Eagle is the symbol of God bringing his people to the promised land. This one over here, she's holding the sword of truth and the scales of equity and justice. And that's what God does. He's the one who judges. He's the one who balances the scales. And what the people who are now in ownership and control of these buildings, which is the ancient conspiracy, Lucifer and Cain's church, they have different stories about what all this stuff means. So this is just all government stuff. So what they do is they take God's symbols and they create different stories and they use them in their perverted and corrupt ways. But if you go to the scriptures and read what the scriptures are saying about all this stuff, it's very obvious what's going on. So real quickly, I want to show you some verses from the Old Testament that talk about robes, and that's where these robed people are coming from. And then I'm going to talk to you more about who the stone woman is specifically. So Exodus 19:4, this is the verse where it says, I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. Like we just saw the stone woman in a robe with the rod that had the eagle on top of it. Exodus 29:5, when they're building the tabernacle, they've set up the priest hierarchy, the priesthood, and they're doing all their stuff. Part of that is dressing in robes. Exodus 39:24, upon the hems of the robe, pomegranate. So they're putting pomegranates, and pomegranates is another stone artwork piece that we see all over these buildings. And it's like there's so many different symbols that could be all over these buildings, but they're all an exact match from the scriptures. So how does that add up? Right here, talking about the pomegranates again, but along with the pomegranates, there's also bells upon the hem of the robe. 1 Samuel 24:4, this is where David, the man who slayed Goliath, the giant, he got really popular, and the king of Israel named Saul at that time was going, I don't really like this guy. I'm going to try and kill him because he could easily become king because the people like him so much. And David's like, I don't want anything to do with that. Like, stop trying to kill me. I'm not trying to take a kingdom. And there's even a point where Saul gets basically dropped right in front of David, and David can easily kill him. But instead of killing him, he cuts off a piece of what? His robe, because these people wore robes back then. Who wears robes nowadays? Did the pilgrims and coal miners and cowboys wear robes? Were they in love with robed people? And how'd they move all the weight? They're not the architects. They're not the people who constructed these buildings. Ancient people are. Talking about David again, 1 Chronicles 15:27, David was clothed with a robe of fine linen. These people were clothed in robes. Job 29:14, I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My judgment was as a robe, showing that robes is a sign, a symbol of righteousness. Isaiah 22:21, here we get the robe and the girdle together. It says, I will clothe him with thy robe and strengthen him with thy girdle. Matthew 27:31, this is when they were killing Jesus. They were getting ready to hang him on the cross. It says that after they had mocked him, which is still what they're doing exactly right now with all these buildings and all these stories that they're telling and how they're using these symbols in perverted and corrupted ways. It's all mockery. They're mocking God. And after they had mocked him, They took the robe off of him. Once again, showing these robes meant something back then in ancient times. They mean nothing almost in our times. So why is it robed people all over these buildings, all over our country? And then back to the Old Testament, Isaiah 61:10 says, he hath clothed me with the garments of salvation. He hath covered me with the robe of righteousness. These robes is a symbol of righteousness, is the garments of salvation. It's all, these robes are related to Jesus Christ, him being the one that offers us salvation. And then it continues, and we'll transition this into who the stone woman is. And it says, as a bridegroom decketh herself with ornaments, and as a bride adorneth herself with her jewels. So who is this bride? Who is this stone woman? Jeremiah 3:14, saith the Lord, I am married unto you, speaking to the children of Israel, the tribes of Israel, the seed of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. Malachi 2:14, the wife of thy covenant, the people that God covenanted with, the seed of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. That's the wife of the covenant. That's the woman, that's the bride, that's the stone woman. Revelation 21:2, New Testament, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. The husband is Christ. The bride is us, should be us, the people, the covenant, that the seed of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, the people of his church. The bride is the church. The bride is the covenant people. He, Christ, God, is the husband. Now we'll take a look at this building right here that they call the Federal Building. Also has a rapid timeline. Construction began in 1904, completed in 1908. 4 years, so not as quick as 1 year, but especially for those time periods, that's a crazy timeline for this amount of weight and perfect masonry. And if you look right here, she's kind of covered up by the lamp pole. I'll show you some better images right here, but right here is the stone woman with some men by her, and the men have robes or girdles on their loins. And over here you can see a little better. Here she is again, robed woman, and she's got some other interesting symbols right there. So here's a more close-up look at one of those. Here's the stone woman. She's got a book of scripture in her hands, the word, and then you've got her over here again reading the word, robed woman. And then over here you have a man wearing a robe or a girdle about his loins. And then also inside of the building, here's the robed woman depicted once again. Then there's also the Providence City Hall right here, just another crazy stone building. And it says it was constructed between 1875 and 1878, 3 years. Our stick frame homes that are super lightweight compared to all this stuff don't even get constructed oftentimes in 3 years. Here's a couple pictures of the interior, just so much insanity. Poor dirt people aren't even thinking about building stuff like this. And this is one thing I like to point out, but the floor of these buildings is always just tremendous stonework and tile work. And the story goes in the pictures, construction, that they built it all on dirt roads. Like, okay, if you're this masterful with stone, you definitely would have paved some roads. But nope, always dirt roads in the story that we're told. And then if you look at this picture right here, who used to be right outside of this building on top of this tower? The robed woman wearing a robe of righteousness, robe of salvation. And she's also got armor of God, and the sword of truth. And then she also has a wreath in her hand. If we look at 1 Kings 7:17, part of the building of King Solomon's temple was wreaths of chainwork. Wreaths are mentioned several times as part of that. Once again, just a symbol out of the Old Testament that randomly just shows up on all of these stone buildings all across the country. And then there's also this picture right here. I'll show you this building more in a second, just more incredible heavy stonework. But right here, another tower with the robed stone woman on top of it. What is she doing? Why is she everywhere? Why is she always stone and not always stone, sometimes she's gold and stuff like that, but usually she's stone. She's always robed, and she's always got these symbols that match the scriptures. Another thing that's very common with these cities, these stone cities, is there used to be a lot of trains and a lot of trolleys, a lot of rail tracks, and those get demolished and decommissioned. And a lot of buildings are also usually destroyed in order to lay down black asphalt and put us all in these little cars that are just death machines. They cause so much more death than trains. If we all were taking really nice trains and trolleys around, almost no death. But you put everybody in cars, constant death. It increases death by a lot. And that's exactly what's going on here with this trolley tunnel. Is now it's only buses that run through there when it used to be trains that used to run through these. I think this picture right here gives us a pretty good idea of how tall some of these cities, these stone cities, used to be. And they had transportation and tunnels and bridges and railways at all levels. And so this trolley tunnel that we're seeing, I think, is still just a leftover of some of this type of architecture. Even if all this gets buried down here, well then even at these upper levels, there's still bridges and tunnels and stuff for people and transportation to travel through. And it says the tunnel traverses a 100-foot drop in elevation from its east to west portal. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the skaters that are bombing this tunnel, because it says that fast skateboarding through the tunnel is fairly common, and that sounds like a lot of fun. In 1948, the tracks were removed and the tunnel was paved for use by buses and trackless trolleys. Get rid of the trains, they're too safe, they're too good at moving weight and people around, and people have to kind of feel and be with their community on trains. You can separate people and you can increase death if you just put people in cars. And you can strap them with insurance laws and license laws and registration laws and all that garbage. Here's an old picture of the West Portal, and that's just like that bigger image I was showing you of the whole city. They had this stuff like running through their buildings, like really, really amazing architecture and transportation. Here's another look at it right here, just running right below the building right here, right through the building. Get rid of the tracks, get rid of the trains, get rid of the trolleys, cars and buses. That's just, it's far inferior transportation. Cars and buses are very much inferior to trains. So why are we getting rid of all the trains? And then there was also a huge hurricane that went through the area that damaged or destroyed more than 57,000 homes, it says. This one's different. Lots of times we're hearing about it's fires that caused all this demolition. If you watch my Boston, Massachusetts video, it's just straight up like blowing stuff up, demolition. So there's always some sort of story that they have for thousands and thousands and thousands of stone buildings getting demolished. In this case, it's a hurricane. And sure, maybe there's a natural disaster, but also when you look into things like weather engineering and all that is very real too. So I don't know, like it's, once again, I think it's very intentional demolition of these stone cities, and they have several different ways, the devil and his church, of demolishing things. Like they're also not poor dirt rag people. Like they got some real tricks up their sleeves and some real machinery and some real weaponry and all that kind of stuff. And then here's just a couple bonus buildings that I wanted to show you to kind of wrap up the video right here. This old stone bank, you know, slap some new letters on it, put a new sign on it. I talk a lot about signs in the Stone Woman presentation and how they lie through their signs, but slap a new sign on it right there. But if you look at this building, it's just this beautiful old stone structure with a tremendous dome on top of it. Right here it calls it a distinctive gold leaf spired dome, and it says it's a prime example of the style of bank architecture in that time. Bank architecture? This is ancient architecture, and you slap the new sign on it that says bank. But to say this is bank architecture from the 1800s, like that's just so much silliness. And to wrap up this video, just another very cool one I wanted to show is the Providence, Rhode Island, what they call State Armory. Just an ancient castle right here. Here's a modern day look at it. Truly just an incredible castle structure right here. And if you read the Old Testament, castles, talks a lot about castles. And it was built in 1907. They're given again a 1-year timeline. Providence, Rhode Island, amazing architecture, lots of symbolism straight from the scriptures.